Welcome everyone to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast, the podcast focused on leadership. The episode will begin shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Dr. John Bedker Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, John Bedker. Well, another tumultuous week. Today, the day of this recording, is what the President of the United States is calling Liberation Day. A catchy phrase. What does it mean? Well, this is the day he's going to announce his tariffs to be placed upon trading partners with the United States. Now, most of you all are quite familiar, but just to be clear, this notion of tariffs is really a tax, an expense, a cost for goods and services that we sell to other countries or other countries import to the United States. We are going to be creating this tariff war, if you will, between ourselves and trading partners, some of whom are our closest allies. Well, doesn't sound like a great idea. Certainly economically, it sounds like a actually quite poor idea. But nonetheless, that's what Liberation Day is about. That's today. I thought it would be important to talk about some of the tumultuous things that have been going on in the context of waiting for this day, because again, another tumultuous week. So here we go. I'll talk about just quickly some of the background items, and then I'm going to talk about one in particular that I'm actually quite proud of. So here we go. What's been happening in addition to Trump announcing his Liberation Day today? Those tariffs, by the way, will be announced in about 3 hours from the recording of this podcast. Okay, so yesterday there were a number of elections. 2 in Florida, 2 different congressional districts for the House of Representatives, congressional seats, and the Republicans won both. If we look back, though, to the elections last November, when President Trump ran, every congressional seat comes up for vote. These 2 seats were won by Matt Gaetz and Mike Walz, now both of whom have moved on. Walz to another position in the government, Matt Gaetz out of government, but in any event, the seats were won by 30 or more points. So quite substantial victories. Well, what happened yesterday in these congressional special elections, as they're called? Well, those margins were literally cut in half, just about in half. So pretty substantial gains for the Democrats. And while the Republicans won, for sure, to be very clear about that, not a particularly strong showing. You peel that onion, so to speak, you would find that the Democratic voters came out purposefully, intentionally, to have a voice, to speak out and say no. They were voting for the candidate, the values, the proposition. Those on the Republican side, quite the opposite. Not so much about the candidates, their values, their policies. Rather, pretty much a straight Republican ticket. That's the red or Republican candidate. That's who I vote for, end of story. Don't really know who they are or much about them. And if I do, I don't really care. I'm voting Republican. So there you have it. 2 different sort of perspectives in that. In Wisconsin, there was a pretty large race, surprisingly so, but a pretty large race for an open Supreme Court seat in the state of Wisconsin. Now, in comes Elon Musk. I guess we should say now the famous Elon Musk, spending money, over $25 million supposedly, to support the Republican candidate on the right. The woman running on the other side of the ticket, the Democratic side, was not supported by Elon Musk. In fact, quite the contrary. So what happened? Could money buy, effectively, a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court? And at the end of the day, no was the answer. In fact, it wasn't close. The Democratic candidate, Ms. Crawford, won by 10 points. So a resounding victory for the Democrat in that race. So those are going on. What else? Well, not surprisingly, we've got President Putin of Russia saying that he is not going to agree to ceasefire or ceasefire talks. That's not surprising, but nonetheless, President Trump was supporting him and believing him and certain that he wanted peace and saying that things were moving affirmatively. Well, now the dose of reality, no. The dictator, the autocrat, was not being truthful. So, lots going on again this week. I've mentioned only a few things. Elections in Florida, elections in Wisconsin, world events. And what happened in the context of all of this that I really want to talk about, and that is a U.S. Senator, Cory Booker. Spoke on the floor of the United States Senate for over 25 hours. Incredible, phenomenal, a record. So I'm going to read from an article from the New York Times to begin this with. It's by Tim Balk, Mike Ives, and Matthew Bigg, dated April the 1st. Title of the article, Cory Booker condemns Trump's policies in the longest Senate speech on record. I'll read just part of it, but it really sets the tone for all of these events that are going on and where an individual is and how to look at ourselves in that mirror, if you will, about what we might do. Okay, from the article, quoting, "The New Jersey senator spent much of his speech, which ended after more than 25 hours, assailing the Trump administration. He eclipsed Strom Thurmond's filibuster of a civil rights bill in 1957. Senator Cory Booker, his voice still booming after more than a day spent on the Senate floor railing against the Trump administration, on Tuesday night surpassed Strom Thurmond for the longest Senate speech on record in an act of astonishing stamina that he framed as a call to action." Capture those words, folks, a call to action. I've spoken about this before, but that is a call to leadership. Leaders are called to act. The metaphors, pretty straightforward. Think of that fireman running to the fire. A call to act, to save that building, to save the people inside it. A policeman going to help a person in need. A call to action. Okay, back to the article. Mr. Booker, a New Jersey Democrat and one-time presidential candidate, began his speech at 7 p.m. on Monday, vowing to speak as long as he was physically able. In a show of physical and oratorical endurance, he lasted past sunset on Tuesday, assailing President Trump's cuts to government agencies and crackdown on immigration. He ended his speech at 8:05 p.m., 46 minutes after eclipsing Mr. Thurmond's 24-hour, 18-minute filibuster of a civil rights bill in 1957. He finished by quoting John Lewis, the civil rights hero and congressman. Mr. Booker said of Lewis, quote, "He said for us to go out and cause some good trouble, necessary trouble, to redeem the soul of our nation. I want you to redeem that dream. Let's be bold in America." Cheers broke out in the chamber when Mr. Booker passed Strom Thurmond. For a moment, Mr. Booker addressed the man he had eclipsed. Again, quoting Senator Cory Booker. "To hate him is wrong, and maybe my ego got too caught up that if I stood here, maybe, just maybe, I could break this record of the man who tried to stop the rights upon which I stand," Mr. Booker said. "I'm not here, though, because of his speech. I'm here despite his speech. I'm here because, as powerful as he was, the people were more powerful." He said the United States had reached a, quote, "moral moment," end quote, that required a stand against the Trump administration, which he said had brought the United States to a moment of, quote, "crisis," barely 2 months after the president returned to office. Again, quoting Senator Booker, "My voice is inadequate." More than 19 hours into his speech, "My efforts today are inadequate to stop what they're trying to do. But we, the people, are powerful." Cory Booker repeatedly drew on American history, comparing the moment facing the United States under Mr. Trump to the civil rights movement and the fight for women's suffrage. I'm going to refer to that more here in just a moment. Senator Booker quoted repeatedly from speeches by Lewis, the civil rights hero, and John McCain, the Republican senator from Arizona, who broke with his party to defend Obamacare in 2017. At one point, Mr. Booker spent some 30 minutes reading an account by a Canadian citizen, Jasmine Mooney, detailing her detention in the United States by immigration enforcement officers. Quote, "We're senators with all of this power, but in this democracy, the power of people is greater than the people in power," Mr. Booker said, adding, "The civil rights movement wasn't just won because a few black folk stood up. He called on a broad coalition of Americans to stand up to the Trump administration. A call to action, to speak up and to speak out." Throughout his speech, Mr. Booker attempted to frame his case as existing outside of run-of-the-mill Washington debates, as a call to action at a pivotal juncture. He made that point over and over in his 25 hours, that this call to action was necessary, was critical, because of the pivotal juncture we're at in America. Quoting Senator Booker, "This is not right or left. It is right or wrong." Mr. Booker said on Tuesday afternoon, "This is not a partisan moment. It is a moral moment," and concluded by saying, "Where do you stand?" So again, not politics. That's not what leadership's about, folks. It's not about the right or the left, liberal or conservative. No. Leadership, fundamentally, in the end, always boils down to doing the right thing. And as Senator Booker says, it is for us to say this is right or this is wrong. And to make clear that this is not, again, a partisan moment. It is a moral moment. Each of us as leaders has to figure out where we stand. Okay, so he spoke about history. And again, as I've mentioned, I've done podcasts about some of these exemplary leaders. And I'm going to give just a few quotes from a couple of them because it's worth reviewing. And it's worth reviewing what Senator Booker did for 25 hours on the Senate floor. Start with quotes from John Lewis, whose famous quote, "Get in good trouble, necessary trouble, and help redeem the soul of America." And Cory Booker was talking about that. We're on a precipice. We're at this pivotal point, as he says, where we could lose our soul, the soul of America. John Lewis, quote, "Speak up, speak out, and get in the way. Get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble." Again, that visual metaphor, thinking about that fireman running toward the fire. That's a trouble, a place of trouble, danger. But that's what needs to be done to help those in need. Next, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. Now, oftentimes in our neighborhoods, I get this a lot in my neighborhood. "Oh, let's not talk about that. Oh, those people don't mention this. Oh, yeah, I'm not going to say anything." This type of language. What John Lewis says, let me read it again. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. Quote on voting. "The vote is precious. It's almost sacred. It is the most powerful and non-violent tool we have in a democracy." And we saw that yesterday in Florida. 2 wildly red Republican congressional districts where the Republicans won again, but their margins were just greatly diminished. There was a show of force, a call to action by Democrats. That is to be applauded. Similarly, in Wisconsin, where the woman running for the Supreme Court in Wisconsin is challenged by Elon Musk and the Republican candidate, and Musk brought a bunch of money, over $25 million, effectively hoping that money would talk and that he could effectively buy the seat. Well, the voters of Wisconsin spoke loudly and clearly. She won by 10 points. So, not a small victory, a resounding victory. That vote is precious and cannot be bought. Next, you must be bold, brave, and courageous and find a way to get in the way. And certainly one of those, not only a right but a responsibility, is for every one of us to get out there and vote. Be bold and be brave. Stand up and to vote for that person who you hope, who's going to try at least to do the right thing, to do the best that they can to do the right thing. You've got to do that. One more and I'll move on. We've been too quiet for too long. There comes a time when you have to say something. You have to make a little noise. You have to move your feet. This is the time. Okay. John Lewis, an exemplary leader. Just a couple of quotes. But he's speaking to what Cory Booker spent 25 hours on the Senate floor this past day doing. Speaking up and speaking out. Lastly, I'll conclude with just one quote from Thurgood Marshall. And again, I've done an entire podcast on Thurgood Marshall. He's an incredible leader, incredible man, prominent figure in civil rights. He was the first African-American Supreme Court justice. His writings, his speaking, he really left behind a legacy of powerful and just meaningful quotes, many of which address themes of justice, equality, and the importance of speaking out against injustice. So, to conclude, here's just one. Where you see wrong or inequality or injustice, speak out, because this is your country. Thurgood Marshall. Okay, folks, so much going on, so much happening. We really just need to be guided by what the essence of leadership is. Do the right thing. Not partisan, not politics, leadership. Do the right thing. Whether that compels you to vote, to speak up, to speak out, you know what the right thing is. All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tell your friends, and, of course, please follow our podcast and subscribe. Thank you again for tuning in.